Good day, everyone. My name is Peter Johnson. I'm a technical marketing engineer for Cisco Security Business Group. Today I'm here to talk to you about Cisco's Stealthwatch Enterprise and show you the technical decision maker presentation for that product. So effective security basically depends on total visibility. As companies these days adopt new practices and technologies, you need a way to be able to detect the threats that are currently active in your network. Every organization needs to be aware of what constitutes normal behavior and normal activity within their on-premises network. And when you add to that multiple branches, roaming users, bringing their own devices, cloud applications, and storage or cloud-based storage added to your traditional networks and data centers, visibility into all parts of this is essential. We all have, every company uses traditional security solutions such as firewalls and SIEMs, but how do we know that these are working and managed and configured properly? How do we know these tools are doing the job that we need them to do? In addition to giving you visibility into everything that's going on in your network, Stealthwatch can also give you visibility and the ability to effectively watch the watchers of your network. This includes knowing what every host is doing, seeing who is accessing what information at any given point, and also giving you the ability to see these conversations and the exchange of data between each individual host. And then from there, it's important to kind of know what constitutes normal behavior for a particular user or a host, and then establish a baseline from which you can kind of compare and be alerted against if activities or behavior patterns change. Business must have visibility into this entire network infrastructure to be able to take action quickly when a threat becomes active or alive in the network, and to overall kind of minimize the impact of this on critical assets within the network. Cisco's Stealthwatch Enterprise is the most complete visibility and security analytics solution that leverages the telemetry already being produced from your network infrastructure. It gives you this advanced threat detection, and by virtue of that, it allows you to accelerate your response to threats, as well as giving you the ability to monitor and simplify network segmentation. With a single, basically agentless solution, you get visibility across the extended network, including endpoint activity, branch network activity going on in your branch, in your data center, and within the cloud. And currently is now the only product that can actually detect malware in encrypted traffic and ensure crypto policy compliance without using decryption. So let's talk about how Stealthwatch works. And first, we're going to talk about how we do our collection and optimization of the telemetry that we collect. So Stealthwatch Enterprise works by collecting and analyzing a robust spectrum of enterprise telemetry from all levels of your networking stack. It provides end-to-end visibility across the entire digital business by largely leveraging your existing network infrastructure. This allows you to get this visibility without having to deploy agents and whatnot across routers, your switches, your firewalls, and other network devices to get rich security analytics. And the thing is, Stealthwatch Enterprise scales with your business as well, giving you a very robust and complete ability to monitor everything going on in your environment. So the network itself is a valuable data resource. Stealthwatch's bread and butter when it comes to getting visibility into your network is utilizing NetFlow. NetFlow provides you with a robust amount of information about what's going on in your network and is readily available from devices that are already deployed across it. From this, this is your single source of truth about all observed communications that go through these devices. It's a trace of every conversation in your network, showing you who talked to who, over what ports, and how. This gives you the ability to see north-south communications as well as east-west within the network environment, compared to utilizing like a span-based traffic analyzer. It's extremely lightweight. NetFlow is metadata, so it's very light. Gives you the ability to easily locate and determine indicators of compromise, as well as provide additional telemetry about observed communications within the environment. So again, NetFlow is extremely useful. It is an old technology, but it's established, it's widespread, and we can make use of it very easily. With that collected NetFlow, we do a number of different things to further optimize it. First thing we do is we do deduplication against that. So if we get NetFlow records for a given communication passing through multiple exporters, we can sit there and identify the fact that we're seeing the same communication in a pair of exporters and remove the duplicate, and basically this allows us to avoid false positives and misreported traffic volume, and further enables efficient storage of this telemetry data. This allows us to compress down something that's already fairly squishable even more so. In this particular step, this is necessary for accurate reporting of activity within the network. Add to that, we do a process of stitching. As you may or may not know, NetFlow is a unidirectional telemetry record. Basically, it shows one side of a communication going across the network. We take both sides of that communication and we combine them into a bidirectional record or biflow record. It basically gives you kind of a conversational look at the actual communication, and basically makes it significantly easier to visualize and perform analysis against that. On top of that, we also enrich that that conversational biflow record with data from numerous other telemetry sources. We can intake firewall action items from numerous firewall vendors, including Cisco, ASA, FTD, and Meraki. We can bring in user and device information from Cisco ICE. We can bring in endpoint-related information and get process and application visibility using AnyConnect. We can bring in proxy data and add that to the mix as well too, from the WSA and other third-party proxy vendors as well too. And again, we don't just, and this is very important, we aren't just reliant on Cisco-based telemetry exporters. If you're using another company's networking equipment and it's capable of exporting NetFlow, and it's properly formatted V5, V9, or IPFix, Stealthwatch can consume that, and we can make use of it. So again, we are agnostic as long as whoever is sending us in the telemetry is sending it in to us correctly. So we take all of that and we end up creating what we call like the general ledger. And this is a combined record of everything related to a given network communication. This is user information, this is interface information, layer 7 information. With all that, we kind of create this great centralized record that tells us not only that it was this, IP address talking to yet another IP address over these ports. The IP address, the source IP address, was logged into with a specific user, like Ethel from HR or whatever, and they were communicating using this application. And they were using, and this particular communication was happening over an encrypted channel that was using this version of TLS. Basically, we give you 100% network accountability, and we store months of this forensic telemetry for future reference. And again, a typical Stealthwatch deployment is typically spec'd out to hold several months or more of this information. I've seen some customers go up so far as to have 6 months to a year's worth of forensic data held. So again, this is very powerful. It's a very useful accounting tool, and basically it's a great way to get a holistic view of everything that's going on in your network. And just to kind of underscore the fact of, that this is a prevalent, useful thing, NetFlow and export is available in products across the Cisco portfolio. what you're seeing here is not an exhaustive list, but you see we have numerous sources that we can take advantage of to give you visibility into your environment. And again, this is not exhaustive, and it does not include potential third parties as well, too. So what do you do when you have this massive lake of data? So what we do here at Stealthwatch is that we intake all that information and we begin performing analytics against it. So Stealthwatch's capabilities as a data aggregation and a retention platform are augmented by this robust set of security analytics that it can bring to bear against all the data that it actually is collecting. And again, we collect this rich variety of telemetry from your existing network infrastructure. From that, we're able to build baselines of expected and what is considered normal behaviors and levels of activity for observed hosts across the entirety of your network. And in doing so, can pinpoint and determine when one of those begins to work outside of the established norms. And with our global threat analytics integration, we can bring in an additional layer of machine learning powered analysis of network activity observed and collected by Stealthwatch and reported up into their cloud-based platform. And from there, we can then compare that against known threats in the wild by correlation against this established global risk map. And additionally, we can collect and provide our machine learning platform with this collected encryption telemetry generated by select ET-enabled Cisco networking hardware. And what this does is this provides us with the ability to detect malware activity attempting to hide using encryption and within encrypted communications. And the big thing here, and I'm going to keep hammering this home every time, is that this is done without actually decrypting the encrypted communications. And again, Stealthwatch is key to this. If you are thinking ETA and you're thinking you want to leverage this capability, you need to have Stealthwatch. It is critical. So again, this allows us to do advanced detection of threats and activity within the environment using entity modeling. And again, we leverage that large comprehensive data set that we create by aggregating all that telemetry information that we've also gone in and we've optimized and enriched. And we begin applying algorithms and heuristic-based detections against all that to look for anomalous behavior or definitively bad behavior, and all that is then fed into a number of high-level alarm categories to alert you when things are misbehaving or behaving anomalously or violating policy within your actual network environment. In addition to that, Stealthwatch Enterprise integrates with the global threat analytics platform. I've made mention of this a few times. If you've heard of cognitive threat analytics in the past, we are now calling it global threat analytics. So when you hear global threat analytics, if you're familiar with cognitive from the past, this is what they've been rebranded as. So just so you know that going forward. If you're unfamiliar with cognitive threat analytics, it's a cloud-based multi-stage machine learning analytics engine. That's a whole lot of buzzwords thrown at you, but what it does is it correlates threat behaviors seen in the enterprise with those seen globally, and then it applies a funnel of analytical techniques to detect advanced threats. Basically, the first stage it builds an established baseline of what is considered normal across your network, and then it begins looking for anomalies and things that fall outside the norm for that too. Once it does that, it attempts to, or it works to classify what the activity that it's seeing is. Once it's classified a specific activity, it attempts to determine, is this a malicious activity? Is it unusual DNS request, or is it a large amount of data transfer? or as a communication to a known bad external site. Once events have been classified and malicious events classified as such, those are then compared to known threats that are currently active out in the wild via that global threat map. And if the activities being observed in your network match up to anything that's been seen out in the wild, the global threat analytics can report this information back to Stealthwatch, and you can be alerted that this particular threat is currently active within the network environment and should be mitigated against. And what this does is this integration with global threat analytics powers our ability to detect malware and encrypted traffic. Traditional inspection, with bulk decryption and analysis and re-encryption basically is becoming impractical or unfeasible. It was always kind of difficult to do, but it's just getting worse. The amount of actual encrypted data across the network is increasing substantially. And in addition to this, you have privacy regulations in place that frequently limit its use. Cisco's innovations in flow analytics will basically help you understand these characteristics of the encrypted traffic without the requirement to actually decrypt the payload. So basically, again, if you're selling any Cisco hardware that's capable of exporting ETO crypto telemetry, and that's like the Catalyst 9K, the ASR 1000, the ISR 4000, the CSR, the ISRV, you should be selling Stealthwatch with it. If you're not, you're doing your customer a disservice. The only way to get visibility and to make use of that encryption telemetry is to use Stealthwatch. So basically, you should look at it like milk and cookies, or beer and pretzels, chocolate and peanut butter. These things go good together. So when you think ETA, you should think Stealthwatch. And don't forget, all of this is done without decryption. So let's talk about advanced threat detection, what Stealthwatch can do for you there. So basically, Stealthwatch is a very extensive network behavior and anomaly detection engine built in just like on-prem, right? This gives us the ability to do behavior detection, and which requires us to kind of understand, what's considered bad behavior. And by virtue of building out our baseline and whatnot, we can also see, when something goes outside the norms and begins behaving abnormally or anomalously. So the way the Stealthwatch security model works is that Stealthwatch has a number of algorithms and heuristic analysis capabilities that it leverages on this collected telemetry that we get, and we look for patterns and other activity going on, and when particular behaviors and particular types of network activity are detected, and if they raise an alarm, these particular events and these particular alarms feed into higher level alarms, and then you can basically know, you end up with groups of logical alarms based on these, suspicious, anomalous, or outside of the norm events, and these range across a number of different categories. You can alert on or know, if you have sources or targets of excessive network scanning, or policy violations, or data hoarding, or other types of insider threat activities. You can determine whether you have hosts in your environment either behaving as or connecting to command and control servers, or basically allowing like a backdoor into your network for someone outside to come in and wreak havoc. You can determine, and even though we don't necessarily position Stealthwatch as a DDoS tool, by virtue of the fact that we are sitting here collecting all this telemetry about what's going on to hosts within your network and the hosts communicating outside the network, we can detect and alert you to DDoS activity, whether or not you have hosts within your environment functioning as sources of DDoS activity or as the targets of that. And again, our big use case and one of our big selling points is insider threat detection. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And that kind of falls into categories like data hoarding and exfiltration. And so, what's data hoarding? We basically look for two different types of data hoarding. You have suspect data hoarding, where you basically have like a single host within the environment collecting an unusually large amount of data from one or more hosts. And you also have target data hoarding, which is a single host is sending out an unusually large amount of data to one or other hosts. Basically, both of these are attempting to identify insider threats that are either collecting or distributing data. And then in addition to that, you have data exfiltration. If you look at this as a, an ongoing pattern of behaviors, typically your data hoarding activities precede the data exfiltration activities. And what data exfiltration is an unusually large amount of data from a host within your network crossing your network boundary to one or more external hosts. Think of like the Edward Snowden type scenario. Stealthwatch can detect and alert you to this activity at every step of the process and give you the capability to stop it cold and keep yourself from being struck by a potentially embarrassing or costly data exfiltration or a security breach. Additionally, as part of our ETA capabilities, we're able to collect and store a number of encryption-related attributes about observed encrypted data sessions. Information including the types, versions, strengths, and types of encryption being used in observed encrypted communications. And we can transmit this along with additional behavioral information about the encrypted activity up into global threat analytics for this additional layer of machine learning powered analysis, and where it is then compared against these known threats currently active in the wild. So I've talked quite a bit about how we're able to do this encrypted malware detection without using decryption. And a lot of people ask, how is this done? And largely, it's by leveraging information that I just talked about that we extract from that initial handshake communication, as well as looking at behavioral attributes of the encrypted channel to make inferences about what the communication that we're seeing actually is. So you'll see that there's characteristics around the sequences of packet lengths and times of a given communication that you can use to kind of determine the kind of activity that's going on. So like for instance, a Google search page download. You have your source host communicating to a known good server out on the internet, and the amount of data sent and received kind of follows a typical pattern of behavior. Whereas if you're dealing with like a particular host in your environment, initiating communications with a command and control server, is potentially communicating to either a known bad server using like a self-signed certificate, using specific types of encryption that are known to be tied to this particular threat. That could be an indicator that this is malware using encryption within your environment, and this is the type of thing that the global threat analytics is able to do this kind of comparison against and determine, this is the type of threat and this is bad. And again, like exfiltration, key logging type behavior too. Again, there's an expectation and there's kind of observable patterns of communication that are known good and potentially known bad, and that potentially map up against known bad threats that are currently out there. And this is what we're looking at when we do our encrypted threat analysis on the encrypted data sent in from the ETA-capable networking equipment created by Cisco. And again, the big thing I want you to take away from this is that for the entirety of the solution to work, there are 3 different components to this, and Stealthwatch is central to it all. So again, if you want to do anything with ETA, if you want to do anything with encrypted traffic analytics, if you want to do crypto and analysis and policy compliance, you have to have Stealthwatch as part of this, no matter what. So, and again, with regards to this, if for some reason you don't have access to hardware with ETA metadata that capable export, you can still do additional analysis on selected internal traffic and perimeter crossing network traffic in your enterprise environment by enabling the integration with global threat analytics. You just will not be able to do the encrypted malware analysis or the crypto compliance piece of that, but you're still getting that extra layer of analysis. Now, if you want to use Stealthwatch and you have ETA-capable Cisco hardware, but you can't or don't want to make use of the Global Threat Analytics platform, you can leverage Stealthwatch to perform encryption policy validation and auditing, but you don't get the encrypted malware capabilities. And if you have all three components, you get the whole shebang, right? So again, it's critical if you want to sell your people ETA and you want to fully leverage the visibility and the capabilities that opens up, Stealthwatch has to be in the mix. Again, Stealthwatch and ETA, milk and cookies, beer and pretzels, chocolate and peanut butter, very important. And what this whole suite of capabilities gives you is the ability to rapidly respond to threats in your environment. So alarms that are raised by Stealthwatch are displayed up on our primary dashboard and very large, because you basically has a quick snapshot of all the observed hosts behaving badly and the various alarm types that are currently being triggered in your environment, and you can drill down quickly into those, and all this behavior and all these alarms are tied to specific hosts. And by virtue, like if you're integrated with Cisco ICE, it's not just a host, it's a potentially a user in your environment. And this allows you to quickly drill down and see, who's doing what, who's responsible for what, and who in your environment or what hosts in your environment are currently the most operating outside the bounds of what's considered normal or acceptable. The Global Threat Analytics integration allows you to apply machine learning to these threats, and again, leverage the global threat map and other things to determine whether or not threats in the environment are, part of larger threat campaigns, and again an additional analysis on potential threat and behavior. And then this machine learning platform applies its own threat ranking to things, and is able to sit there and again detect these threats in encrypted traffic, and things that are detected as being or occurring within encrypted traffic are labeled as such. And you can, if Global Threat Analytics is able to make a correlation or a match against the known threat in the wild, it can actually identify it as such and provide you with plain English write-ups about what exactly it is in your environment that you're currently facing, and basically what expected patterns of behavior are, and some fairly high-level options for mitigating against the threat. And once again, once you've gotten an identification of a host acting maliciously or anomalously or containing a known identified bad threat, you can quickly investigate everything that Stealthwatch has aggregated about those hosts. I mean, you can see the username of whoever's logged into that host by virtue of our integration with ICE, including you can also get down to the device type and device name around that too, see whether they're currently active, what policies you have placed about that. You can see observed communication patterns of that host to hosts and groups of hosts within your environment, within your organization, as well as hosts and host groups and different countries and whatnot outside of your environment. And you can further drill into that and see what kind of communications were taking place. You can also see a trend of the types of alarms or other kind of behavior that this host has triggered, over a period of time, to see if there's any kind of patterns or other concerning activity this particular individual has been involved in. And again, as part of that, that host drill down into their activities, you can see the top security events that this particular host has triggered for the past day, and understand, what exactly this thing is triggering by, by what it's doing by its observed behavior. Understand, why the event was triggered, how it was triggered, as well as what it means and why it could be important to you. You can also see, whether it's the source or the target of a given security event or potential attack, and you can quickly drill down into the associated telemetry with just a couple of clicks from that display. And once you kind of start digging into this massive database of telemetry, you can quickly filter and display, what aspects of the communications are important to you. If you want to see, communications of a specific application type, or a certain number of data transfer or more or less undertaken, you can specify that like quickly within the returned results and just filter down on that, and then export that information in CSV format for whatever other type of investigation you'd like to do. And then once you've determined that this host is something that needs to be dealt with, if you're using Cisco ICE and have that integrated with Stealthwatch, you can do rapid threat containment without any kind of business disruption. From that host information screen, you can launch quarantine and unquarantine actions against the offending host quickly, and then do whatever remediation you need to do, and get on with your life. So really what this does is it speeds up and streamlines your entire response process to any detected threats or anomalies in your environment. Stealthwatch and Global Threat Analytics can trigger an alarm based on a host's activity. You can quickly identify, what type of host this is, what kind of device that it is. Pull down additional information that's been collected by Stealthwatch about this particular host. If you're integrated with ICE, you can see who the user was. You can quickly see, where the data has been transmitted, what kind of data was transmitted, if this is malicious or a breach of policy or other type of violation. You can quickly quarantine and remove the threat from the network, and then you can go back into the massive data store of information that Stealthwatch collects about all the observed communications and perform forensic analysis against that to see who all they talked to, and and what and how, and basically to give you all kinds of additional context around the particular event that has occurred. Ultimately, what this serves to do is reduce your incident response time from months to hours, or potentially in cases to minutes, and then this is huge. Another main capability of Stealthwatch is giving you the ability to monitor and vet your network segmentation. So part of the power of Stealthwatch is that it gives you the capability to define and monitor what's important within your network environment. Stealthwatch uses this concept of host groups, and these are user-defined, basically buckets of or virtual containers of IP addresses, and that's range blocks, et cetera, built out for whatever potentially makes sense for your given network's topology. These, again, allow you to define what's important in your network and allows you to monitor communications and other activity that occurs between them. And so once you have assets that known assets or discovered assets within your environment, you can classify them to, again, whatever makes sense for your particular environment. These can be servers, desktops. You can base, firewalls. You can base it on location, buildings. You can base it on geographic location. Branch offices in certain cities, that kind of thing. Whatever makes sense for your given network, and whatever makes sense for what you want to monitor and collect information about. And in addition to this, Stealthwatch gives you comprehensive visibility into all the digital assets on your network. Again, by virtue of the fact that we're collecting all observed network communications, you can find and categorize any hosts on the network, basically based on how they're talking to other hosts. You can search for assets based on if they're talking, if they're serving up NTP requests or DNS requests. This is excellent for helping you locate potentially misclassified or heretofore unknown servers, or servers that you thought were decommissioned that are currently still operating, or potentially rogue servers in your environment, offering up services that you don't want them to be offering. Stealthwatch can help you locate these, classify them appropriately, and take action against them. And Stealthwatch's comprehensive visibility also gives you the ability to model and monitor implemented policies across your network. You can build out custom security events to alert you on any number of current policy violations. And in addition to that, you can it gives you the ability to kind of quickly model what a new implemented policies or policies that you're looking to implement, how those would affect traffic flow and other services within your environment and within your network beforehand. So in this way, you can verify that basically what you have in place currently in your network is properly configured and functioning as intended, or you can also verify that potential policy updates and whatnot that you would like to deploy or implement isn't going to potentially harm or interfere with the operations of your network before you actually commit it. And finally, you can also profile and model and track behavior of specific applications or customized applications within your environment, basically breaking it down by IP address, port, and DPI information. So, for example, if you have a particular database server that's used for, in this case, production or payment processing, you can define the parameters over which how hosts communicating to this server work with it, and you can actually track that that particular type of application traffic and build out reports and other information about that. So again, Stealthwatch is a very incredibly useful and powerful tool, and we have lots of customers that have used this and love this. And along those lines, so like as I'm sitting here telling you about all the things that Stealthwatch is capable of doing, just don't take my word for it, right? We have customers love us. They they gush about how we help them drop their time to respond to threats. How we've increased their network visibility from knowing virtually nothing about what's going on to basically being able to see everything across there. How we've helped with their ability to plan out and to monitor network segmentation. How we've reduced their ability their response time to threats active within the environment. How we made to quickly be able to pinpoint sources of threats and other activity within the environment. And again, Stealthwatch is the source of truth and the best tool for detecting and seeing activity in your network and as a whole. And again, I mean the praise kind of goes on and on here. So again, people that have used us and have implemented us generally love us, and they get immense value out of what we provide. So that's what Stealthwatch can do. Let's talk about how we do this. I'm going to kind of go into the components of Stealthwatch and briefly talk about some of our integrations, and then I'll be done. So in order to do what we do, we have a number of components that give you flexibility and the capability to comprehensively pull in all this network telemetry and other information present across your network environment. So let's go into each of these components individually and talk about how you get value for this from your deployment. So from a bare minimum, when you're actually configuring your telemetry sources, you want to make sure that you have, again, at a minimum, flow coming in from your network core and from your edge. This gives you a fair amount of visibility, or a good amount of visibility into your environment, and as well as potential threats that are operating, attempting to go across your perimeter and going across your organization. But ideally, I mean, you want to drill down as far down into the access layer, or as close to the access layer as you can get if you want full comprehensive east-west visibility of everything across your network. And again, we can take telemetry sources from basically anywhere in your environment. And as part of this, if you have areas of your environment that you want to get visibility into, and you don't have the ability or the capability to export NetFlow telemetry or whatever from that, we have an option for you to deploy in that space to generate that visibility. So for any Stealthwatch component, there's basically 3 core components for any Stealthwatch deployment. That's the management console, the flow collector, and your flow rate license, which is basically your license for processing collected telemetry. The flow collector is kind of the workhorse of the system. You pump all your telemetry into the flow collector. The flow collector aggregates it, cleans it up, builds and maintains the major database, and performs the majority of the really in-depth analysis against the data. The management console is used as kind of your interaction. Basically, whenever you work with a Stealthwatch system and those screenshots, whatever that I showed you, that is the management console at work, and that's kind of your pane of glass into this massive database of information that's being collected. And it kind of works as sort of like your macro and micro level tool for getting in there and working with that data and seeing what's going on in your environment. Now, to add to that, there is the Stealthwatch flow sensor. I forgot one thing here, and I apologize. Now, these components here, the management console and the flow collector, are available as physical appliances and virtual appliances. The virtual appliances are supported in VMware, ESXi, and KVM-based hypervisors, and the physical appliances are, usable anywhere basically. The flow sensor is also available as a physical or virtual appliance, and this is what I talk about using if you need visibility into areas of your network where you don't have a native NetFlow export capability. You take a flow sensor, you deploy it in the area of the network, you sit it on a span or a tap port, and it reads PCAP off of that and does some deep packet inspection against it to generate network telemetry data for you. In addition to that, since it's doing deep packet inspection, it can actually pull out some layer 7 application information to give you additional visibility into that information going on across your environment. This gives us stuff like round trip time information, server response time information, URL information for web traffic, layer 7 inspection, and then application identification. So again, this exists as a physical and a virtual appliance. The virtual appliance is a slightly different use case. You're using it also for getting visibility into areas of the network where you may not otherwise have it, but it's primarily for usage in hypervisors. And this is to give you visibility into what's going on in between your intra-VM traffic visibility. And like that, you sit it on a virtual port and you switch it to promiscuous mode, and then basically it operates the same way. The flow sensor sits there and reads PCAP coming off of that and generates the NetFlow export that it can then send into the flow collector. Now, UDP Director is again a physical or virtual appliance, and basically this gives you a lot more flexibility in your deployments. It allows you to take NetFlow, syslog, and SNMP data from multiple collection points and or multiple exporters, and basically what you point them to this thing, and the UDP director can then fork that data out to as many collectors as possible. This is useful in environments where you have net flow collectors for other purposes already in place, and you either can't configure any more exporters, or you aren't necessarily in love with the idea of having to sit here and modify that kind of information for, potentially hundreds and whatever switches on somewhat of a regular basis. You can basically drop a UDP director in place, go back through, configure all your exporters once just to point everything in there, and then just, as needed, send that data out to whatever collectors you want. And this keeps you from having to do massive amounts of network reconfiguration and other things. And again, just generally increases your flexibility. Stealthwatch's ability to ingest proxy information gives you visibility into proxy communication traffic going through your environment. We support the Cisco WSA. In addition to that, we also support Bluecoat proxy, Squid, and McAfee Web Gateway proxies. And again, this gives us additional visibility, and this actually can be used as part of the telemetry upload that is sent into Global Threat Analytics if you enable the machine learning capabilities of Stealthwatch. This is part of that particular data set that's set up there. Stealthwatch also integrates with the Cisco Security Packet Analyzer, and basically allows you to make Stealthwatch into a bit of a scalpel when it comes to doing PCAP analysis. You can use Stealthwatch to be alerted to specific events in your environment that maybe breach policy or whatever, and based on those traffic flows that that Stealthwatch has collected and observed, you can use that to pivot into the packet analyzer and pull back the requisite or the associated collected PCAP files for that communication and do forensic work on them using the tools built into the NAM. So again, very powerful integration, very cool. Additionally, we have our endpoint visibility solution. That's our endpoint concentrator, and what that allows us to do is integrate with AnyConnect running endpoints that have the network visibility module enabled. And what those do is they will export their NVZ flow information to the endpoint concentrator, and the endpoint concentrator then sends that into the flow collector, which then gives us the ability to tie in process name and hash information about activities on the host. So then it no longer just becomes, we saw this host communicating this other host over, port 22. It then becomes, well, we saw this host communicating with other hosts over port 22 using X application for this. And again, this is great for doing forensic accounting of, what applications are running on your hosts, and how these hosts were communicating, with the observed traffic that they were engaged in. Again, we integrate with ICE, and with ICE's passive identity solution as well too, the passive identity connector. This allows us to pull in user and device information, and again correlate that with the observed activity that Stealthwatch collects. Our integration with ICE goes back a long time. We've been we've integrated tightly with them for a long time, for a good period of time, and so this is one of our deepest and most robust integrations. If you're using a full version of ICE, and not just the ICE pick version, this is what gives us the ability to do rapid threat containment via quarantine and the unquarantine actions that we talked about earlier. And again, this is a great integration and extremely useful in terms of a telemetry source for us. What makes this so valuable is that it allows us to pull in identity context from almost anywhere. We can get information from WMI, Kerberos, and the iSPIC agent. They can provide us Active Directory information. We can consume syslog from almost anything, including BlueCat, Bluecoat, and F5 devices. The REST API can take in data from custom applications, VMware products, Windows Terminal Services, or Citrix. And the endpoint probe can give us Windows user information, as well as providing answers to questions like if it's the same user and if they're still active. And Stealthwatch ingests all this data via pxGrid to give you this additional context around the observed network activity. Basically, and again, giving a name to a host and allowing you to enable mitigation actions from within the SMC's host view. So again, Stealthwatch plays nicely with other Cisco security products across their portfolio. We make use of many of them, allowing us to either ingest telemetry from or pivot into them for additional information and context. We work together with devices and other services through Cisco. And again, if you're positioning us or them, you should consider, trying to tie us all together as part of, larger deals and whatnot, because again, we just reinforce and improve one another by virtue of the integrations we have in place. Again, the ICE integration providing you with contextual host information and the ability to do rapid threat containment. Tetration analytics integration helping us build out secure data centers by analyzing network as well as application level telemetry. Our integration with the Cisco Security Packet Analyzer, and basically in further investigating and getting additional context around threats by pivoting to AMP or Umbrella Investigate or Threat Grid. So basically, to sum up everything, Stealthwatch gives you pervasive visibility across your enterprise, largely by leveraging the network hardware you already have in place. In addition to that, we give you the tools and whatnot to get telemetry from areas of the network that you may not be able to export it from naturally or natively. And with this visibility, we provide you advanced threat detection, accelerated threat response, and we give you the tools to monitor your implemented policies and segmentation within your network, as well as suss out future needs and going forward. Cisco Stealthwatch is the cornerstone of Cisco's ETA solution. Again, if you're selling ETA products, you should be selling Stealthwatch too. It's powerful, it's robust, and you should be selling it to everyone who cares about what threats are going on in their environment. And for more information, go to cisco.com/go/stealthwatch. Thank you.